What is up, Bible Baddies? It's your girl Dom
and Audra,
and we have a special guest today.
Hi, how are you ladies doing today?
We're good. How are you?
I am really excited for this.
Are you?
it is exciting.
I can't believe I'm sitting here right now, but it's going to be a good time.
It's going to be a great time.
Yeah.
So, backstory on Mr. John Doe. He's going under the pseudonym because he has a long career history in detective work and some pretty heavy cases. And so we want to protect the identity of our Tuesday treasure this episode.
I'm just very lucky to, end this with y'all, and I'm excited to see what we can uncover.
Yay! We're excited to have ya. I feel like when we're most prepared, it's like the worst. And like we're just like sitting there and we're like...
The best interviews happen when you're just sitting around smoking and joking.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're in the conversation, you're listening, you hear the things, and if you have a good partner that's taking good notes, and then it's like, oh, that's a fantastic, let's circle back to that. Can you explain and clarify that? And then you're just off.
Yeah. Exactly. So you get it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Interview 101.
Yeah.
We're still learning our interviews.
He's probably going to be interviewing us because he's like an interrogator for his job.
No, it's not our episode.
Like, he's going to start asking us in-depth questions, and we're going to be like...
And I'll answer them, and it'll become my story. I'm like, it's not my turn yet.
It's not my turn, sir. So take us all the way to the beginning. How you were raised, your background, all the fun stuff.
When I was just a wee one, adopted at birth.
Wow, adopted.
And that's part of just the alternate reality that I've been able to see now that I'm older, that was a blessing all on its own. And seeing what could have been, from an outside lens, that was absolutely God's blessing. When I grew up it was actually a Catholic family. So when you're Catholic, you get baptized as a little baby, with the vinegar and the holy water. And,
is it vinegar?
Yeah. They touch your lips with, because they want to bless you, mind, speech, and heart, kind of thing. So grew up very Catholic, went to CCD. And then, my dad was a very devout Catholic and moved around because he was a government employee. And from there, lived several different places as a kid, and then grew up in North Texas, and high school, college, and then found police work.
What was it like traveling to all those places?
So as a kid, it was pretty cool because you don't think about it in the sense of, you miss your friends, you miss your people, but it was always something kind of new. And you had a new house, you had new people you got to meet. And now as an adult, I think those are skills that I learned as a young boy to how to acclimate, to different locations, and you learn people skills, you learn navigation skills, you learn communication skills, and it gets you out of your little box. So I loved it. I'm still transient to this day. I fight almost staying in one place, now. So, but it's, I really enjoyed it. Lived some really cool places. The coolest one was, it was an old Civil War fort base that we lived on. It was because of the rank that my dad had. We lived where all the generals from the Civil War lived in, and that was really cool.
Yeah.
We always thought it was haunted
because
they were from the 1820s or whatever, right? So, but it was a really cool experience as a kid.
That's awesome. That probably is what molded you today. All your people skills, all your dad jokes.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. When you're in those situations and you have to meet new friends, and it forces, hey, what's your name? My name is, hey, what do you like to do? Oh, I like baseball. I like video games. It's just a really neat, you just learn basic, how to make friends.
Yeah.
And now I can talk to a wall.
Yeah.
So
I believe it.
So
that's awesome. When you were in high school, were you still in North Texas?
Yes. So I grew up in North Texas, went to high school in North Texas, sports, and they had a big mega church. It was I didn't realize what mega churches were. You don't, because they were just coming about, right? And I don't even know that you even had a term for it. And then even in high school, you're like, you just think it's a big church. So I started out, and I got ahead of myself a little bit. I started out, so my dad did pass away when I was a kid, and from there we jumped off into the Southern Baptist Convention, and that was so I came up in a Southern Baptist church for a while.
Is that because your mom then raised you Southern Baptist when he passed away?
That's what she grew up.
When she was married, did she practice Catholicism?
That's
because
correct.
of your dad?
So when he passed away, then we started going to the Southern Baptist Church, and that was very different. The fire and brimstone and beating the pulpit up, and the pastors that ran those churches were so good. They were good men. They were just really good men. And I will forever remember those because I got to meet them, talk with them. My grandparents went to the same church as well. And there just wasn't a bad bone in those men's body. And they spoke very well. It was just very passionate. And from there, after middle school is when I started going to this mega church. And that was a whole different experience as well because it was non-denominational. There's very production type services, 10,000 people coming to the church services and stuff. And the youth group was, I think they had 2,000 or 3,000. They had broken down from elementary, middle, and high, and middle school and high school. I mean, I swear there's 2,000 kids that were involved with it. Lots of programs, lots of like small groups and stuff. So you got to meet, and you had leaders that would almost like mentors because they had the boys together, they had the girls separate and stuff. So it was good for the boys to have a good mentor that would run the groups to kind of keep you on the right track kind of deal. So went on a church retreat, and that's when I was baptized as it was my decision to do that. And I felt convicted through, at that time, through the messaging and the things I was hearing that I wanted to do that. And I got to experience that and had the head pastor baptize us while we were on this church retreat.
How old were you?
I want to say I was 14, 15, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So, obviously a difference from Catholicism to, non-denominational. It goes from, hey, at birth, we're going to go ahead and get this knocked out, to now you learn and you take it all in and then you base it off of your conviction.
Yeah. It's your choice.
It's your choice. That's right.
What was your baptism like?
It was intense because it was a lot of, I had 20, 30, 40 people being baptized, and it was in some sort of makeshift pool in Colorado is where we were at. And it was kind of cool. I think I still have pictures somewhere of it. And it was just a really cool experience. Just felt good.
Yeah.
And, of course I was nervous, oh my God, I'm actually doing this, and it was like showing that I could give that public display.
Yeah.
So I also grew up Catholic, and so I very well know like being dedicated at birth and all that stuff. So I just kind of want to hear your perspective too on how your perspective, I guess, changed growing up in Catholicism versus when you switched over to the Southern Baptist and kind of understood that it becomes more of like a relationship with God versus these are your duties to like kind of earn his love kind of thing, The
Catholic churches I grew up in, the fathers, I was very lucky to have good men through my religious time or my, church time to speak with, right? And I remember my first confession, and that's where Father George, and he was such a good man, and he had a real thick Irish accent. Because it's just that East Coast where I lived at the time. And I remember that's where you kind of start understanding that, the Catholic priest or the Catholic preacher is your intermediary to like speak on your behalf to God.
Right.
And, give you your punishment, your rosaries, and you say your Hail Marys and Our Fathers, and you go and you sit in the pew and you ask for forgiveness, but ultimately he's the one speaking on your behalf to God. Right. And then understanding and kind of making that transition to you can just go directly to him now. You just have a conversation, and it's not so structured.
Yeah.
You just pray or you talk or you try to have these conversations. And of course it's way easier said than done, right? You definitely try to make the effort to develop that relationship where you can have that conversation, which was a huge difference. It was a huge difference to say, oh, I can just pray. Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah.
Just go to your little happy place and have some quiet time and be able to have a conversation. So it was definitely a learning. Oh my God, I can do this on my own.
Right.
Don't have to have another human do it for me. So, which is obviously now, even where I'm at now is nice because, the church I go to now, I'm not a front row guy. Not going to do it, but I like to sit in the back and I like to listen and I like to listen to the words. I take notes, and, then I'm able to process that on my own and how I interpret it and listen, and then be able to, follow up where I can.
Right.
So it is definitely different because, the homily, right? You got the homily and you're sitting there and you sit, kneel, stand. And, I still, every once in a while, still go to like midnight mass, just kind of, it's more for my dad, because that's how I connect. And I'll go light a candle, and say a little prayer, just not to completely forget my Catholic roots, but it's definitely different. It's definitely my relationship now and what I take away from it.
That's cool. I feel like just you saying like 14, like that's just so wow to me because I was still in the Catholic faith at that age and very much trying to kind of break away from it. So I was brought up in it for much longer and very much developed this ideal that God was like so scary. Hearing your story a little bit and knowing that I'm just fascinated that you kind of were able to separate religion versus relationships at such a young age. I think that's always so awesome when younger kids can give themselves to Christ. That's so cool.
It's hard because you get in this, I got to go to church. I got to go do and if I'm not doing this, I'm not going to have, and it is being able to separate, like it's just a building, you know, it's a building with people that have common interests that go and are able, it's a safe place to go and worship ultimately. Well, it should be a safe place, but at the end of the day, it is your relationship and how you, to me, you want to learn because there's people there that know way more than you. So you at least want to take it in and then, okay, well, I didn't know that. Like, what's the one thing you learned from the message? Right. And that's what I try to focus on now. And even then it was just because of my attention span, you know, I needed to be around somebody that knew a lot. So I would stay focused and interested. So that to me, again, not my Catholic roots, I get it, but I didn't have the interest and it was hard to follow. So now when you have somebody that can break it down and put it into like real life terms, like you take so much more away from it. And that's what I knew. Maybe even at the time I didn't know that's what I wanted, but I knew it. And now, even now more so, that's what I need.
Right. Yeah.
Like more than structured hour and 15 minutes of this is what's going to happen. And it's the same thing every Sunday.
Is that the one and only time you got baptized?
Yes. Yeah, as a baby, obviously, and then
when you were 14. What was your first confession?
Well, that's part of the Catholic Church. That's part of the process. You got to do confession and then communion, and then you do
confirmation.
Yeah, confirmation, right, which is a big deal, and you learn about all about the Catholic Church, and
you get a saint.
Oh, you get assigned a saint.
Well, you pick. I think you can pick. Yeah.
I had the one. And of course, I'm sitting there as a kid, just want to talk back to my mom. And I'm not nice to my brother. And, you know, I took a piece of candy or something, you know, like, please, I'm sorry. Like, so, and of course, you know, because you're 7 or 8.
Right.
How old,
and as a kid, too, you're like, oh my gosh, I've done so much bad. You know, I was like, pick an area. I've done it, you know.
So it was, and that's what I'm saying, that preacher or, you know, the father of that Catholic Church, I mean, he was so good. You know, he was just I knew I wanted to, you could pick, because there was a couple of other assistant father, whatever they call them, right?
I think they're fathers,
yeah. And pastors and
priests.
There we go.
Priests. We'll get there eventually.
I know, I'm struggling. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I was doing it too.
Assistant priest that you could talk with, but I knew I wanted, and he was just very understanding, you know, especially when you're going through an intense, like, and you're sitting right across from him, and just almost as close as we're interviewing right now, right? And I'm sorry, please forgive me.
It's a very humbling experience.
Please don't give me 200 rosaries, please. You know,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
You're like, no.
And
then you got to do them too, because you'll feel the conviction. You're like, oh, if I just don't do the 2 extra, I have 2 more to go. God, but God knows. You have to do them.
Yeah.
God knows.
Oh yeah, you can't cheat either. You got to sit there and do. Oh yeah. And
I walk back in there and be like, Father, I didn't do my confession.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I had it's funny, my dad's parents, they were very devout Catholics as well. And when we get in trouble at Grandma and Grandpa's house, we'd have to go into the bathroom and kneel at the tub and have to ask for forgiveness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it would be like they'd set a timer, one of those old school egg timers, you know?
Yeah.
And I'd sit there with the rosary and, you better do it. Okay. And so they'd count them out the whole time.
Oh.
So, and they didn't play around. Memories. But yeah, it's, now that where I'm at, it's definitely a relationship. Yeah.
Okay. So take us after high school and take us into kind of like your life path, where that takes you into college, and then kind of get us to where we are now.
After high school, I went on, played college sports, and I had it dead set. I was on a different career path. Dead set. Because it was kind of like following in my dad's footsteps, right? And that got, screeching halt kind of thing, and nothing negative, nothing crazy like that at all. It was just a matter of like, when you run into a brick wall, you run into a brick wall.
Yeah.
Like you're forced, hey, we're going to show you the ginger way first, right? We're going to be gentle. And then when you're stubborn and hard-headed, like I may or may not be, I can't confirm nor deny, you get the hard brick wall. And I know that it was divine intervention, because you can't negate it, right? Because even my last try to go down the route that I wanted to go to was, I mean, everything was ready to go. And then right at the last minute, it's pulled away from you. And it was nothing. It was just complete out of my control.
And what was that?
At that time, there was a lot of government cutbacks. And when you have a contract in hand ready to go, apparently you can't say no, but like the government can say no.
Oh, wow.
And they said no.
To get into what?
Go into federal service.
Okay.
And they said nay. And that was absolutely divine intervention, because that was literally the third time I put like all my eggs in that basket to go. You know, I had a job at the time working for the school, at the college I was at. Quit that job. I had just gotten married, came home, ready to go, and big negative. So I was like, what now? And then from there, that's when I found being a cop. Never, ever thought. Where I grew up, we would tease local cops because all they had to do was break up field parties and kids acting derelict, right? Like that's literally all you had to do, because it was a little farm town at the time, right? I didn't even play cops and robbers as a kid. That was just not even a thing, so.
Who or what got you into policing?
So I had family encourage me at the time, and I'll be honest, I needed a job. I mean, that's literally the reason why I needed a job.
And they suggested being a cop was the route to
I
go.
had a good background. I mean,
all your people skills.
All my people skills.
All your people skills.
And I mean, that's the thing about policing, right? Is that and at the time, early 2000s, they were very, very strict. It's not like now where as long as you've got a pulse, they'll do whatever they can to get you hired, because all these police departments nationwide need bodies. They could be very, very choosy. And I had a clean background, so it just made sense. And when you truly have a clean background, it just makes the path that much easier. Yeah. So you had a college degree, never been in trouble, never been arrested, never done anything that caused the cops to get called on you. Nothing. It was just, I was a college kid. Yeah. I needed a job.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm going to take it a little bit, not political, but like a kind of touchy political subject. But in your opinion, and being in that industry and kind of just obviously probably seeing way more than the average person, how would you define a good, I guess, godly character of what a cop should be? Because I know that there's a lot of negative connotation around cops, and I think there's very much good in that field. So just kind of speaking to that, what would be a good character of somebody in that, with that uniform?
From my perspective, the perception, at least what I've received, is that cops are robots and they're not capable of compassion or understanding, or, they do all the things that the media says that they do. And unfortunately, because of where we're at, a lot of the discretion that we used to have, or that cops used to have, you don't have anymore, because you have body cams, you've got mics, and it's like, well, why did you let this person do this and you didn't let that person do that, right? You're not allowed to be a human anymore. At the time, I've seen great police officers be able to exercise very articulate discretion on to take action, not to take action, to make an arrest, not to make an arrest. And that, to me, and weighing all the facts and knowing that they are godly men, truly make the right decision in that situation. It's made that more difficult, because you see a lot of that on the streets, right? When you're working a beat, and, whether it's a domestic or it's, somebody that's in crisis, or somebody that's, maybe it's a kid that made a bad decision, and, that type stuff, right? And especially in the height, you're talking about, they called it the Ferguson effect, right? 2013, you working and, coming through that, what the Ferguson effect is. So that shooting that occurred in Ferguson, where the kid was the cop shot the unarmed kid, and they did the grand jury no-billed him because there was a whole bunch of information that wasn't relayed to the public, right? So that was 2013. And that's a big deal. That fundamentally transformed policing from that day forward. And, the credibility that gave police officers, that affected, and it still affects it to this day. Yeah. Even more so with all the defund, police movements and things like that nature. And, of course, now that pendulum's, it appears it's trying to swing back the other way, because now we have all of these issues going on in, these major cities. But, when you see somebody that has that ability to still find a way to funnel their belief system into how they treat somebody or take care of somebody, or even if they have an arrest that they have to make, they still do it in a very dignified manner of it's a job. I understand, and they're still able to, it boils down to a respect, and even, the respect that they have for those humans, and ultimately treating them in the best way possible. Sometimes it's hard. I mean, there's a lot of parts of policing that just aren't pretty.
Yeah.
The ones that are still able to find a way to, still do it in a very dignified way. That's when you see it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I believe in the characteristics of our God, right? And I know that our God is a just and righteous Father. And so I do believe that can exist here. And I know that we are image bearers of him, right? And so I believe that the goodness of him can exist in our justice system. And so I just wanted to touch on that, I guess, a little bit to kind of just shed light on, I know there's some negative connotation, but I think at the end of the day, we have to remember that we are all human, and that does not take away big mistakes that are made. But I think it's a lot of people just doing their best. And I think when people bring God into an environment like that, there's so much that goes unseen. The media doesn't highlight those good moments or those good people that are in those uniforms doing very righteous, very just actions. And I know they're out there, and I know that they exist, and I know our God is in that. And so I don't know. I just want to thank you for your service in that too, because that is a very hard job to step into. And when you can do it with dignity and like putting on like the armor of God, it can be done very well.
And I appreciate that. It's the whole perception of like, it's like any profession, whether you're a doctor, a teacher, or a lawyer, there's always going to be the crooked one, right? It's just unfortunately because police have the ability to arrest you and create, and not because of actions that the cops do. Nobody forced you to rob that bank, but you get caught or something happens and you have to go to jail. Now you have a legal process now that you have to go through, right? So that is a tough job. And when you have one or two that ruins it for literally the 99% that do that job, whether they go to church or not, they'd still do it because they want to serve their community, or they want to serve and try to do better, like at least to do one good deed to help somebody out, or help a problem out, right? So yes, you're not going to see, because that doesn't create viewership. Right.
Well, it's the same thing, honestly, like with Christianity. How many people will say like Christians are the most judgmental, Christians are the worst, but then you have people sitting here like us who open our homes to the most off the wall people, that you wouldn't think, like, I mean, it's true. And I try so hard daily. I know you do as well, Tom. Like, we're not those Christians that you see on the streets judging people. We're not that. We're trying very hard to kind of take away this negative connotation that Christianity has. And I think that is something that the world does, is it takes very good things that were given from God, meant to be good, meant to be done well, and it twists them. And I think that that's just because we live in a fallen world. That's the enemy that infiltrates into these things that were meant to be so good. But also too, you have to think, if sin wasn't real, we probably wouldn't need a human justice system.
To me, what I'm hearing is ultimately there's so much negative, right? And negative sells.
Right.
Right. So the negative news of the shooting happened, or, this person did this, or, God help us with the politics, and, the world is doomed because we have a new president, or the world is doomed because this, whatever, right? We want to focus on the negative. We want to focus on that cop that did that one wrong thing, right? And yes, those outcomes are catastrophic. Let me negate that. I understand that. But at the end of the day, though, you have, hundreds of thousands of police officers, state, local, county, federal, that go to work every day and do the right thing and go to their calls, and they take care of those humans that call 911, and they do it the best that they can with the media scrutiny, the internal scrutiny. Because I'm telling I can say this now, the most toxic place is a police department. There's so many internal politics and where people just ignore, right? I mean, even in the police department I was a part of, there was internal politics to the point of it just made you feel gross.
Like what?
Do explain.
You want to talk about favoritism. You want to talk about the internal racism in these police departments that, because of all sorts of factors of, the police department is supposed to reflect that of the community. Well, police departments will find ways to weed out white male candidates to get white female candidates, black male candidates, black female candidates, part of the LGBTQ community candidates to make sure, and then on top of that, now you have internal politics of, okay, well, now we need, regardless of this human's capabilities, and their ability to do the job, because of what they look like, we're going to put them in that spot.
Yeah.
And that is like, that's stuff we do not talk about. Nobody talks about that, and that is rampant at big police departments, because if they don't have that representative, that's just what it is.
Right.
And it's unfortunate, but like, so you have these police officers that regardless of, and I know great cops that like, they never bought into the politics that were of all races, gender, all of it. They just wanted to do their job and get recognized for their hard work. And I don't care what anybody says, because I saw with my own eyes, the recognition that you got, and a lot of times was who you knew and then what you look like. So the fact that we have all of these cops that are running around trying to do their job, and then not only do their job right, do it with integrity, do it with dignity, and then you're hoping that, you get recognized, for your good work. And then it's like, then if you bring in your belief system, right, that you pray and you go, the external negative factors and the internal negative factors makes it very, very difficult, at least for me, from my perspective of being able to, where is God?
Yeah.
Where is he? Where does that fit into the job with so much negative externally and internally that you don't struggle with believing, where is the divine intervention, right? And that's real. That's just real, because, when you go through years of just seeing negative and people hurt and people just do bad things, you have to force yourself to make sure you do what you can to maintain that relationship.
Yeah.
Do whatever you can, because if you don't, that internal and external, those factors will just suck the life out of you. And that happens.
Can you remember a time in that? Did you ever hit a wall of like, questioning where God is in this and actually possibly believing like nowhere?
Absolutely. And it's hard to say, because I do believe in God. I love God, and I know he has blessed me with so much, even to where I'm at today. I wouldn't be here without his grace, truly. And it's really hard to like say that out loud. But at the same time, like I know that internally, I know that. And anybody asks me, I'll tell them. It was really hard. We lost our first kid. It was essentially a stillbirth.
Wow.
And, and it was really hard to experience that. And then you experience that, and then you go to work and you just see people that why do they get what they get, right? With no problem at all. And then not letting that affect you mentally, which is super hard, right? And making sure that you still doing your job the right way, and then know that all you wanted was this human, and then you don't get that. But these terrible humans get what they get, with no problem. When you have to sit back, that is definitely bad. The intrusive thoughts, you have to fight those off. Yeah. I mean, it was hard, and it's still hard, but you really have to kind of take a step back and not let the enemy get to you, because there's times it almost gets you, having the discipline to take a step back and, okay, it's not all that bad. Gotta, where you at least force yourself to go to church to be around good.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've definitely experienced of not so much. I really don't believe that comparison is the thief of joy. I think that expectation is, because when we expect things, right? Like we kind of grow up in this world where you watch your parents, you watch your friends, and everybody seems to kind of get what you're supposed to get in life, right? Like you get the career, you get the job or the house, like you get the husband, the whatever, the family, anything, name it. And then we experience life, and people don't talk about those really, really hard things that happen that are unexpected. And then you go back into the world and then you compare it, right? And you're like, well, that didn't happen. That wasn't my story, and why? And it's not so much, it is the comparison, because we're looking to the other people and we're saying like, why did that happen? But it's because I had an expectation that it wouldn't happen to me, or that it would look this way. And then I looked to someone else. And that's where I think a huge root of where we lose sight of God is that we start looking at people and the things we feel God gives them. And then we think, oh, God doesn't love me enough. Did I not do something right? I can only imagine. And I just sit in like your story thinking about that. And yeah, like these are humans. They're going to work and they are experiencing life just the same as we all are. And then they're putting on a uniform on top of it and trying to do good. And at the end of the day, like sometimes they don't. And that's because life happens. And it's not an excuse at all, but it's something to kind of have empathy for, of like, man, they were just a person trying to do their best and that messed up. And that sucks because it's a big mess up, you know, it has serious implications, but you got to kind of like consider like, man, the things you're managing while also putting on a uniform that the world doesn't necessarily love. That's hard.
It's not only that, but it's also the mental health aspect of the job as well, is that with military veterans and things like that. I mean, I remember even in my experience, just from, you know, high school till now, the mental health awareness of PTSD and the things that veterans go through and the sacrifices that they make has been very much focused on and brought about. Now there's so many resources for them, and it's absolutely amazing that they now have the resources that they need, which they should absolutely get to rehab their mind from the things that they've seen and done. And you know, comes to combat and war and, you know, those things that they experience that you can't fathom, right? But for cops, you don't get that. You don't get that. Police departments, and again, this is from my perspective and the things that I've seen, right? That anything that has to do with your mental health and seeing those types of things, the day in, day out, just the atrocities done against mankind, you could lose your license.
Right.
If you have mental health issues. You know, there's some police departments that have good programs in place. You're expected to be stoic.
You're a robot.
You are. You can talk about compassion all day long. That's great. You can talk about, you know, and the biggest thing I always heard in the police, oh, we're a family. We take care of each other. No, they don't. Yeah. Because you're a liability. You know, that's what keeps command staff up at night is, you know, the cops. You're trying to manage 900, you know, 1,000, 12, 2,000, depending on, you know, New York PD. You're looking at 30,000 cops that you're trying to manage. You have 30,000 liabilities running around. The real issue that I still, because I try to keep up with a lot of the ongoing issues in policing still, and, you know, those types of things that they deal with, is that you can go talk to people. You can't put it through insurance because, you know, if it's claimed on insurance, like,
wow.
I mean, because then you're getting claims that could be found out that you're going to a therapist.
Oh my gosh, this makes me mad.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's,
wow.
You know, there's a lot of things that, like, if you're deemed, you know, if you have depression, you could lose your license because you're not mentally fit to do the job.
Right.
Then you're out. I mean, think of the 15-year vets, 18-year vets, 20-year vets that, like, that's all they know how to do. And at least in my experience, and hopefully it's changed, you know, obviously I haven't been inside of a police department in a few years, but from where I was at and what I saw, if you did it, you had to do it off the books.
Wow.
And you had to make sure whoever you talked to
wasn't,
you know, and there was, you know, if you had to pay in cash, you paid in cash.
Isn't that crazy?
So
you had a lot of money to get a therapist.
Well, it just makes me think of so many other things that I mean, this episode could become,
I know.
I don't know, so much, but yeah, that's wild.
Isn't it crazy?
Oh my gosh.
So in your career of being a cop, how long did it take before you were named detective?
I mean, it was about 6.5 years. 6.5 years.
Is that normal?
It depends. Again, it depends on who you are.
Wait, does every cop become detective?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it's everyone. So when you
level up,
everyone starts as a beat cop. Everyone starts in a black and white. Everyone starts in a squad, and you work a beat. You're supposed to. Some people want to go work, you know, the easy part of town. Some people want to go to the hood. Some people want, you know, you can go to different, you know, depending on the size of your police department. You know, if you go to Houston PD, if you go to Dallas PD, Fort Worth PD, you're going to have 5 or 6 different substations that, you know, those cops serve all sorts of people from vast socioeconomic statuses. There's some sides of town that have way less activity. And then there's some sides of town that have, you are literally call to call. And their calls stacked up, obviously, depending on Austin PD. There's always calls stacked up because it's Austin, right? You start as a beat cop, depending on what you want to do. Bigger police departments have a lot more opportunities, whether you want to go and be a detective. Well, detective can twist off into, if you want to investigate domestic assaults, if you want to go to sex crimes, if you want to go to narcotics, or, you know, some of them even have, I mean, they get crazy with it. They've got federal task forces you can go to once you, Or some guys, the knuckle draggers, want to go to SWAT and they just want to kick in doors, and they go to SWAT. There are people that feel compelled to serve being community policing, which I do believe in community policing. I understand that concept. And, so you're, kind of the, hearts and minds, part of the police department, right? Where you go in the goodwill type deal. Some people, all they want to do is promote, right? And so they work a beat, they take the test, they can promote up to sergeant, lieutenant, commander, whatever, and all they want to do is promote. Again, it all depends on if you go to a county sheriff's office at 15 deputies, there's not going to be the opportunities to jump off, and you're going to have a whole different experience out in West Texas, out in some county that's all you have is deputies patrolling that area, as opposed to Dallas PD that has 3,500 cops and 8 substations, a main station, and Dallas County, a major metro area. You're going to have a whole bunch more, opportunities to. So it just depends on what you want to do in the police department. Yeah. So I wanted to be a detective. I really enjoyed, taking it, because as a beat cop, if you report a crime, you go take your little report and you do the best investigation you can, gather up all the evidence, book it into evidence, and then it stops there. And then you're done. Well, then the detective takes it and does all the follow-up work. And, and then getting into, the realm that I was in, I created my own cases, which was awesome. I got patrol call outs and different things like that with I got off into human trafficking, got into child exploitation, that sort of thing. So those cases they were just reported to us unless you got some sort of patrol call out, which they would do their report and then you follow up. But, you had a lot of flexibility to create your own cases. You got complaints and stuff of, concerned citizens that would call in stuff with that. But ultimately it took about 6.5 years. And like I said, it kind of depends who you are, and the needs. That was the favorite thing that you heard. I mean, I don't care what police department you're at. That's what you hear, the needs of the department. That's how they would wiggle, be able to say, well, it just, the needs of the department is where is kind of dependent upon, how quick, how fast, how long, how short it took for you to get into, what they call, the detective bureau.
So I guess fast forwarding a little bit, just to jump into your story, now being a father and having 2 girls, how did working in these cases with child trafficking and stuff like that, how did being a father change your perspective in those cases, if at all?
It changed the perspective of, you really do take more of a human element into these cases, because you're talking to somebody's kid. Right. Because it's well, what if that was mine? What if mine? So you very much dawn that, what if that's my kid? So it's and you're talking to these, these survivors, and you don't, like I said, you're just what can I do to do what I can to make sure that they don't end up that way? I don't want to say it's not every kid's going to end up like this if you don't do something right, but the best advice I got, and this is one from a godly cop that I had, and he just told me, he goes, "You're having girls, right?" He goes, I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Make sure you squeeze them every chance you get, because if they feel that love from you, they'll never want that kind of love from another man." Yeah. That's one thing that from that day, I was oh, shoot, yeah, that makes sense, right? Because ultimately, if they know what that true love feels like, and they know that you love them, and that as a father, you're good, you're protected, I've got you, they'll never seek it from the wrong person, right? I mean, it was 2 sentences, and it just, I can still hear it. That rings true to this day, that, you just squeeze them. Yeah. You just squeeze them, tell them, hey, I love you, and, I'm here. And, you put that effort in to show up and be there with them. And, again, you can do everything in the world, and, we all have free reign, free choice, right? But when you're working these cases and you hear, their story of how dad was never around, or the mom was out running around with her hair on fire, and they ran from from the very, very rich to the very, very poor, right? And the one common thing was, to me, that I found was, again, from my takeaways, was parents just weren't involved, right? Or the dad wasn't there, or, there wasn't, the parenting wasn't, everyone's their own parent, whatever, don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And at the same time, the structure and the accountability that kids don't have nowadays, right? And then the free reign that they have with cell phones and social media, and there's nobody checking them, and they're just, just running around with their hair on fire, doing whatever they want, right? It's very much one of those, as a dad, you do want to make sure that they know, I know where you're at. You ain't gonna pull a fast one on me, right? So, and that's okay. That's okay to be hard on them. That's okay to let them know, like, you're not going to mess with me. That's okay. But then following up with a squeeze and I love you and I know, I get it.
Yeah.
I wear you out. But at the same time, like, you know what that love is. So they're not running to somebody they don't need to be running to.
I actually saw a reel this morning and it was about parenting by a pastor or priest or somebody. And he listed off a bunch of different things on like kind of just what scripture says about being a good parent or whatever. But one thing was something that I was like, okay, I want to take that with me, was there is no disciplinary parent, no good cop, bad cop parent. And that's where a lot of parents tend to make mistakes, is that typically like the dad is the bad cop and then the mom becomes the good cop and like the nurturer and all those things. But he said, if you're the one that disciplines the child in that moment, you should also be the one that goes and good cops, like nurtures too, because it says like, yes, this is wrong and this is not to my standard and you will not live like this. And like you time out or whatever that may be. But then you also then go back and say, I still love you though, because then it creates this like, of course you've disappointed me. You haven't lived up to what I know you're capable of. But hey, like I love you, and these arms that can put you in timeout are the same arms that are going to still embrace you and say like, all right, now let's be better. Like I'm going to show you how to be better. But anyway, I just loved that little tidbit. But so I have a question. How has your relationship with God helped you to be a better father to your own children?
Working on my relationship with God does translate into working on my relationship with my girls and being able to, because they need to see that. They need to see that I'm seeking something greater than everything else. And they need to be able to see that. So again, I'm not one that's going to hit them in the face with it. But at the same time, it's like, hey, we're going to go to church, or hey, we're going to do this. And, you know, we talk about like bring up some sort of kind of, I say lesson, you know, if it's something where we can tie in a lesson of, hey, what biblically speaking, you know, and then especially like engaging with them after they go to their Sunday school and asking them, like, what are you learning? Like what verses did you guys talk about? What activities did you do? And then what does that translate? Of course, I'm breaking it down for them, you know, for them. For sure. But at the same time, like being able to at least have that dialogue, like what did you take away and what did it make you feel? You know, and then what are you going to do to at least try to implement it for the next week? Right. It's nice because like my oldest does go to, like, she really does love Wednesday night church. So she goes to that. And then, you know, my youngest goes as well. So they both really like the Wednesday night church that they go to. And that makes me happy knowing that they go to that. And my oldest likes to serve. Like she likes to help the little preschoolers and the, you know, 2-year-olds and stuff. And I have to say, this time you're going to go to church. You need to learn something. We're not going to dodge learning stuff. But she very much likes church. And, you know, so I try to, as their dad, do my best to, while I'm working on that they know and see it. So that does translate as well.
It makes me think of, you know, how like when you're reading your Bible or something and then you go out into the world, like we're always supposed to be retaining what we're reading, right? And it's like not so much that we apply it to our lives, but we like see God through it and try to then apply like God to our life and like how to be more like him. But anyways, with you saying when they go to Sunday school, I still try to ask them like, what did you learn? It makes me think of like, I wonder if God does that with our experiences. 100%. Like we read our Bible, right? Yeah. Like we have our obviously like we record and it's like, man, I wonder if I need to be more like observant of what I'm reading and then like what happens, not maybe next.
100%. I think God also puts us in those positions like, after we talk about something, like the homeless man the other day.
Don't talk about that.
Like he puts us in positions to be like, today. Are you grasping what you're talking about?
Dom and I failed.
We failed.
So we're humble enough to admit we failed.
We failed. And then we felt convicted about it. But I truly feel like once you learn a lesson, God puts it then in your life. And he's like, okay, what are you going to do now? Are you going to listen to my word and what I've been trying to tell you? Or are you just going to be your human sinful self and not do it? But
anyway, enough of that. Back to you.
Back to John Doe. So have you ever worked a case where you truly felt divine intervention within it?
Yes, I do recall. So in policing, you have a thing called suicide by cop. And
suicide by cop?
Suicide by cop. And you get taught about that. And we had a real-time situation.
And what does that mean?
So what that means is that there's somebody that clearly has the intent to not live anymore. They don't want to do it themselves. So they selfishly put the police officers in a situation where they actually have to shoot them because they won't do it themselves. And that's a real thing. And so
I have questions.
So when you're doing that, when you're in that situation, it's like you recognize it, but you still at the end of the day have to protect yourself. And in this situation, I do recall we were in a were in a situation where, a man was in a car, had a partner. And from there we had, he had a loaded gun and he was facing us. He was pointing at it. I remember I was protecting myself, but there was just something telling me, not now.
Wow.
And, when you really sit back and think about it, it was in that position of, I didn't need that on my soul. I was prepared to do whatever I needed. And I always knew if I had to, I would. And I've never had to, be involved in a critical incident like that.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that was God keeping me safe to not have to have that on my soul.
Wow. I think that speaks so much too to like the closeness we're called to be to him, right? So in situations, obviously, hopefully not that intense. Everyone has their own level of intensity in their life, and so when you can be in that, because feelings are a real thing, right? And like when we feel scared, when we feel angry, when we feel sad, like whatever, we can be very reactive. And those reactions can cause big rifts. And to be so close to God that in that critical moment, you had a choice to make and God kind of put his foot in front of you and was like, no, I'll handle this however he did. But being aware of that voice, and being able to say like, I trust this in this moment. And I don't think a lot of people give that to him the way it's deserved. Some people say it's like the universe or, oh, I just knew or whatever. But like, I really do think God shows up in those moments a lot. And when you can recognize it as like, he was protecting not only that person, but you.
Mm-hmm. 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 Absolutely. And it just boils down to truly like that, that human, he ended up getting the help that he needed. Mm-hmm. And then, I went home safe. Everybody else went home safe. And then we didn't have to have that on our conscience, that we knew that we were involved with something like that. Cause that is heavy.
Yeah.
Because that human is putting you in that position on purpose because they're not willing to do it themselves, which is extreme because I don't want that on my soul.
Right.
And to contribute to something like that. And no cop does. No cop wants to be in a position where they have to go and they have to take somebody's life.
Right.
Because they are in a position or they're in a mental health crisis where they feel that that's their only way out, but they won't do it themselves. So they're going to put that on another human. Mm-hmm. There's not one police officer that wants to be in that position, but it does happen. And those are the hardest ones to deal with.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah. Again, I'm lucky to be here.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Being a detective, how has it shaped your reality of sin?
It's just, is there good left?
Mm.
Are there good people left? Right.
Yeah.
It very much, you go and you contact people at their worst.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you get a very jaded view of, you do. And again, it's like, well, people say that all the time. You do. If you're out there really doing the job and you're in it and you're meeting people on the worst day of their life. Mm-hmm. And it's so hard to not believe that it's always like that and that people are not capable of doing good. So you had to force yourself to find the little acts of kindness or the random acts of kindness that other people would do to other people and really try to celebrate that. If you didn't, you would just get lost. And a lot of police officers, I don't want to speculate and generalize. Again, from my perspective and what I would feel and see, it would appear the ones that just let it make you completely numb it's hard, because that affects you in all sorts, on other aspects of your life, right? Mm-hmm. Like, when you just see sin everywhere and anger and hate and bad and gory and things like, and I'm not saying it's a free, but like you especially in the, big cities, you won't see a lot of stuff. Mm-hmm. You just see a lot. If you let it get to you, it turns you into a shell.
Right.
So what did you do to keep you from being a shell of a human?
Well, for a while there, I was working out all the time. Like you have to find, that's what I would do. I mean, literally between that and when I had kids, like really making sure I spent time with kids. But then it's like, well, what are you doing for yourself? I don't know what I'm doing for myself, right? Like, because you get lost, you almost, in the traditional speaking, men typically put what they need last, right? Yeah. It's making sure that the family good, the wife is good, the kids are good, the job is good. So it's like when you get asked, well, what are you doing for yourself to like reset the mechanism, right? It's like, well, for the longest time, it's like, well, I was working out. I'd go out with the guys every now and then, or, I'd go fishing every now and then or something where but even then you get antsy. You get real antsy. You're like, oh God, you're almost like, cause you're hyper vigilant. It's like mm-hmm. hard to relax, mm-hmm. right? Trying to take up hobbies where you have to relax when you're used to 90% of just complete chill and then 10% of chaos. It's hard. It is hard. And it doesn't make you weak to say it out loud.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of bravado that goes along with being a couple where you're like, well, I don't need to do anything, but then you run into turning alcoholics.
Right.
Or they, start kicking their dog or whatever. Like, there's things that happen because you don't have that healthy outlet, right?
Yeah.
Which goes back to kind of the mental health aspect of it. But ultimately, it's really hard when you see that reality of sin shape in the form of, are there good humans out there?
Mm-hmm.
And you had to really try to focus on the good things that happened.
Like, I think there is a lot of pressure on men, especially like in a relationship, in a family, and just kind of talking about that like antsiness. And I know we're talking about your specific career, but do you also think just being a man and obviously being in a men's community to some degree, like, do you think that's felt by majority of men, regardless of their career, just feeling this pressure? I have to provide. Because it makes me think of just the sin within marriages and like things like that, right? And you said like you get this antsiness, and I can only imagine feeling a pressure, because obviously as women we feel a certain type as well, but like for a man to feel like this is my family, like there's a big pressure on men to provide and to be like this strong person, and especially too then to apply it to your profession, to where you're going out in the field and seeing like, oh my gosh, like this is a lot outside, and then I have to come home, this is a lot right here sometimes. And so, did I ask a question in that? Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ultimately, you're asking me, is there a pressure? You go home to your family and you do those things and to provide. I mean, it goes back to, it's almost like if you show emotion or if you're vulnerable, that it shows weakness, right? And you can't be weak, because weak people get hurt in these positions. Mm-hmm. If you're out working a beat and you're weak, I mean, some make it, some don't. I mean, some quit. Unfortunately, I've seen cops get really, really hurt from being weak when you're in that dominant role of, of controlling the scene, controlling people, and then you're expected to go home and put that down, mm-hmm. right? And then you're being asked, well, how do you feel? Or what? And then, and then it's like, it just doesn't, it's hard. I'm not saying it's impossible and it takes a lot of work, but it's a lot easier to just not do it, because then you're not looked as, and again, this is how I felt about it, was and to a detriment. Right. But there is this pressure on men to produce and mm-hmm. to be that rock, right? You're supposed to be the rock. You're supposed to be the provider, the protector, and you have all that pressure on just in general. And then you got to go out and do a job like that. And it's like you're carrying the weight of the world on you. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it can wear you out for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, other men, you can just see it in their faces. Like they're just wore out. Mm-hmm. The big thing in policing is doing side jobs, right? And you can make good overtime doing side jobs, right? Because, salary for cops, depending on what police department you're at, could be, depending on how much seniority you have, could range from $50,000 a year to, could be, a lot of police departments are paying upper 90s, 100 now, but that's not till 14, 15, 20 years, right? So you got to make ends meet somehow, especially if you got a wife at the house and she's not working, or if she's working and she doesn't make. So these side jobs consume your life, mm-hmm. right? So you're grinding constantly. There are guys that they'd get off work at 6 a.m., catch a nap in their truck, and then they went to, some sort of traffic duty or something that they would earn 4 or 5 hours of overtime.
Wow.
Or they, if you had a sports team, or if you had a concert venue in your city, well, it was, okay, we get off shift. And I was guilty of it for a while too. Cause when you're only making $60,000 a year before taxes, mm-hmm. right? Before taxes, you're, and you're taking that home, and then it's like, well, and then I can go make, $60, $70 an hour overtime. I'll wake up Saturday, sleep in the truck, go work an part-time spot. Okay, well, I'll see you Sunday morning, and so these cops make these sacrifices that, and then never mind, there's a high divorce rate in policing, right? So then paying child support on cop salary, you lose half your retirement. Now these cops are having to work overtime to make sure they're still providing, because, you're getting that taken out. And then you got to go and try to make it up somewhere else. So it's just like, you can see it in their faces, right? That they're wore out from knowing they have to take on that role of providing and staying, strong and being able to continue to push forward, and then go to their job, stay safe, and do it right with however many hours of sleep, right?
Yeah.
With all the other stressors on it, right? So it's a grind. And that's why it's like, you see some of these cops that are 30 years old and they look 90, and it's just part of it.
Wow.
So yes, to answer your question, you can see it. You feel it around your other men for sure.
How has your faith grown seeing so much darkness in the world and the brokenness of humanity? How is their faith? How is their hope?
When you see somebody actually be held accountable for their actions, that they did something wrong against somebody and they finally get what they deserve, that's when you're like, okay. And it's a little bit, and again, it's celebrating the little ones, right? Because like, again, we're talking about like, we're in a time where you're in a major metro area. I mean, Harris County lets, robbers and people, violent crimes out on 0 bonds, and they go out and reoffend and they hurt other people. Same thing in Travis County. Dallas County is guilty of it as well. They let these humans out that do bad things and they go out and reoffend because where they should have been. So when you finally see somebody actually go through the process, be held accountable, it's like, okay, there is hope. Like there is accountability. And then you see there is justice, and it kind of reaffirms, okay, it's not completely broken.
So that being said, I guess what lessons would you take from what you've learned about God's grace and God's justice?
It'll work out. Like, it's not for me to take into my own hands, right? Do the job, do it the best you can, and know that like, if I do right, I'm going to be taken care of. I'm going to be okay. At first, like you want to make sure, and you just get invested in it. And like, that's the human element of the job where you are like so invested in a case and nothing happened. You're just crushed, right? The DA doesn't take the charge, or the victims fall apart, whatever, right? But then when you take a step back, you go, you know what? I did my part. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I did it by the numbers. When you do things in that light, it takes away a lot of stress, because now you're focused on knowing that God's showing me this grace to be able to function and do this job and be able to mentally focus, regardless of everything else that's going on. He's going to take care of me when I do the right thing, and just let it go. And whatever happens from there.
That's like the true image, I feel like, of surrender. Because I think I was talking to a friend today too, of just whenever I talk to people about the struggles of our lives, right, you can almost always boil it down to some form of control. We all hit control on different, and we all want to control things in our own specific ways, but ultimately it's control that knocks us down. And so I think when you can say like, I'm recognizing this is 1000% out of my control, and there is a God of this world that his hand's in it and he's got it. And if it doesn't work out the way that I expected it to, or the way that I fully wanted it to, then I have to trust that God has a plan in this. And that is what that is, I also love too that, you said it a couple times now, of just when the job is so heavy, learning to recognize like smaller things in life that can kind of give you that joy, or, just perspective of like, there's good, even if it's just so simple. And today I was on a walk and I saw this girl, and I was like in a deep conversation, right? But I saw this woman and she was walking towards me and she blew bubbles randomly. And she started smiling and just kept walking. And I literally was like, I want to be her. I don't know. It was just so simple. And it was just like bubbles. And I'm like, it made her happy. And she just wore that joy on her face and just kept on going. And I was like, oh my gosh, I need bubbles constantly. Like, where is my pocket bubble pack? I don't understand.
It's so funny you were talking about that. So I had my girls, it was a couple months ago, right? And it was hot out, right? And we have a gas station right next to the house, okay? And we were getting ready to go do something, and I was running by the gas station real quick. And this older gentleman, he was an older cat, he went in, and his sole purpose was to get ice cream. And I'm telling you what, I've never seen joy on an adult's face. He was standing outside the gas station, and I kid you not, the girls were in the truck. I was sitting there, and I was watching this man. He was happier than, words can't describe the happiness on this man's face as he dominates this vanilla ice cream.
Yeah, vanilla of all things.
From the gas station.
Not even a rocky road.
And I told him, I said, look at the happiness on that man's face.
Doesn't it make you want it?
Yes. And I was like, I told him, I said, guys, we got to focus on the little things. Because that's $1 ice cream cone that he got from a gas station, and he is sitting out there and just enjoying it. I mean, he had a smile on his face. And I said, girls, look at that man's face. And they're like, yeah, he looks really happy. Can we get some ice cream? And I'm like, no, you guys don't get ice cream. But I want you to celebrate the little things, guys.
Yeah.
Like, it brought happiness to me, because it was like, and it kind of recalibrates, like, in general, how you look at things, and, because even now, like, now that I'm out of policing, which is really, that was God's plan. I had to do it. I did what I did. And now that I'm in the private sector and doing those types of things, I was not meant to continue and have a full career, 20 years, 30 years in policing, right? I was meant to get out and be able to recalibrate and be able to see the good in people again. Because I'm telling you, if I was still a cop and I saw that, I wouldn't even noticed it.
Yeah.
And now being able to see somebody's joy from eating a $1 vanilla ice cream cone from the gas station, I was like, all right, I'm doing all right.
Yeah.
And being able to wake up in the morning and say, I'm thankful for this. I know I have this. I've got that. And I wouldn't have that without that grace and that, that protection that I do have from God, and do believe that. And again, I'm not going to be the one that hits you in the face with the Bible. That's not me, but I definitely believe in that grace and go and try to learn and do all those things. And that gave me the ability to witness that man's happiness while he crushed it. And I was like, I want that. Absolutely amazing.
Joy in the little things. Have you ever shared your faith journey with a suspect, victim, or colleague?
I would say bits and pieces of it,
okay,
depending on what they, especially if I had a survivor, somebody that didn't grow up with a dad, I was able to relate and be able to share that. Or if there was a colleague of mine that, was kind of talking to me about some stuff, and I'd be like, oh, they're like trying to confide in me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would recognize that and be able to listen and hear and process that, and, and be able to say, hey, like I can be empathetic to what you're going through, or I can be sympathetic and understanding, as far as like what that looked like. So, as far as it is tough to witness to somebody, right? So that's why I was like, hey, white flag, like I'm not that guy. I'm not going to, I also have enough knowledge and belief that knowing that at the end of the day, no matter what, I'm here because God has meant my timer's not up,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm meant to be here. I'm meant to share little bits and pieces here and there and relate with different people. I do believe in specific situations. So yes, and it was enlightening. I know I would like to think I've helped people, you never know really the outcome, right?
Right.
But you'd like to know, or at least think that, hey, maybe that little piece of humility or, human connection that you could share in that moment and be vulnerable with another human in a job that you're not allowed to be vulnerable,
yeah,
right? It shows weakness.
Yeah.
So I was given those opportunities, and I tried not to miss them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I even think in your line of work, even putting bad people away, you don't know that time, that alone time they have in a cell could transform them. And I know a lot of Christian groups go in and bring a Bible in. You don't know how that could transform somebody just like doing your job.
Yep.
I think that's the crazy thing about the work you do, is sometimes it seems mundane. You're just going through the motions, but you don't know the invisible line at the end of it and who's being caught or what's going on and how it could transform their life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of God.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
We're just one point in the trail.
Seeds.
We're just one seed in the beautiful trail of trees
And just being
that
able
take
to
place.
just being able to grow it where you can.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
I think that's like a big way to show respect to God. And this is what I'm learning is we're given our stories, right? Like God has predestined our entire lives. Like, yes, free will exists and all the things. So we kind of assist in the direction of it. However, like God knows what we're going to go through. And I think in truly honoring God, it's when we see him in the brokenness of the choices that we've made and the corrections within those, and then sharing our story with others. Because what was the point of taking the steps and going through what we went through if it wasn't to help another one of his children, And I just always encourage people with their stories. If you find somebody that somewhat is speaking on something that you can relate to or speak to and help, that is God giving you an opportunity to take it and say, like, I didn't put you through this for nothing. Go help my child who's also now going through it and trying to navigate what next. Is this God? What God, right? Like, oh, I'll tell you what God, because I was there. And I just think it's so important.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so thanks for coming.
So thanks for coming to our TED Talk.
Mm-hmm.
What's advice you would give a young Christian getting into the field of law enforcement or something similar?
You just can't negate the negative that you're going to see.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to, between shift work and being able to navigate just kind of the chaotic schedule that you maintain, you're not going to always be able to go to church. I mean, you're just not, especially if you work midnight, you get off 6, 7 in the morning, you got a crazy shift. You're not going to be able to do that. Your normal 8 to 5, Monday, Sunday, Saturday, Sunday, I'm going to go to 10 a.m. church and have my those days are gone. Depending on the schedule, like that's very difficult. So it's a matter of, okay, you want to maintain some sort of positive outlook on life. You want to maintain your belief in God. At least crack your Bible open. Read a verse. Read a verse.
Mm-hmm.
Just read one right before your shift. Just read one. Process it, pray on it, and go to work. It takes 5 minutes. And I think I have to own the fact that I did not do that. And now that I'm in a different place, I understand if I would have done that and given that advice, or maybe being given that advice, or even had the discipline to do it on my own, maybe it would have helped, maintain a little bit more positive outlook. But, now that's kind of my mindset, is just do a little bit. Just because you're not going to church, you're not sitting in a service or whatever, you still can, like you said, you talked about relationships, right? You can still have a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You can still just read whatever, people will open the Bible, and whatever opens to is what you're supposed to read. That's great for some people, but find a book you like to read, I like to read Psalms,
Mm-hmm.
I just like Psalms. I like how it's written. I like the messaging. I feel like when I read it, it is applicable to whatever I'm going through in life. That book specifically speaks to me.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my advice is, number one, at least read something. Number two, find a group of men, if you don't already have one, that can work with your schedule or through the church, or start your own group, or at least you can have some dudes that are not cops.
Mm-hmm.
Cops, I've got some dear friends of mine that are still cops. I wouldn't trade them for the world, but you get lost in a community of just like-minded humans, where you hate everybody, you can't trust anybody, you got to have your back to the wall, and all that stuff that makes you hyper vigilant. But being able to have a community of men or women, that get in this job that have nothing to do with the job.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to keep you grounded. And even if it's not every week, every other week, do something for an hour, meet for coffee, do whatever you can to make sure that you have that process in place, that you have people to keep you grounded. Hey, nobody's out to get you. Okay.
Yeah.
Nobody's out there getting you.
Yeah.
Because you do get sucked into it. You do. You tell yourself, I'm not going to do that. That's not going to be my identity. And then it ends up,
Right.
that's what it turns into.
Right.
Because it's not it's almost like the profession chooses you. You don't choose it. Right. Because like I said, I never played cops and robbers as a kid. We teased the cops where I grew up. It was a little farm town. That's
Mm-hmm.
all you could do.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a young Christian man or woman getting into the job, those little things. And then number three, really work your hardest to find the good where you can, the little things. I think that just is the difference between make or break.
Mm-hmm.
So, and keeping your true sanity, if you will, in the job, is being able to do those little things and keeping that relationship going.
Yeah, it's perfect.
So that's my advice. Hopefully somebody takes it.
I'm sure they will.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Last and final question. What's your heaven look like?
It's Jesus on the stage, with an AC/DC t-shirt. No.
AC/DC's in the background.
Yeah, yeah. They're
They'll
playing.
be there for sure.
Yeah, they're playing, and it's a rock concert.
Yes.
Everyone's drinking Arnold Palmer's and sweet tea with
Arnold
lemonade.
Palmer's there.
Yeah, lots of trees and mountains.
Love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
and
I'm here for it.
That's what it is.
I'm just getting an image of Guitar Hero.
Yeah.
Watching Guitar Hero, and they're just these cartoony guys rocking out.
Yeah.
That's what I'm visualizing.
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
It's just
heaven.
a full-on rock concert in heaven.
Yeah.
We're all just singing.
I don't think I do think I know some AC/DC, but I couldn't tell you if they were singing it, if that was them.
Yeah, me either, probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm kidding, but that would be awesome, though.
Hey, maybe that's your heaven.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. Maybe it is.
Who
And then
knows?
there's a big lake we go fishing, and then camping, and then it's just all the things. Yeah. There you
That's
go.
perfect.
I love it.
Okay. Well,
So.
I'm going to pray you out now.
Very well.
All right. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this amazing Tuesday treasure. He truly is a treasure to the world, all the works and all the places that you have put him in and guided him in. We are so thankful for, Lord. We just ask that you continue to guide him and bless him in everything he does in this world, and that he can see the beautiful fruits of his labor. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.